Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CSB LinkedIn live session today. And thank you for joining us. We'll be diving into some very interesting topics in the meat industry, reveal meat industry trends for 2025, and make some comparisons between the North American market and Australasian market. Here with us today, we have two incredible meat industry experts, Markus and Brendan. Welcome. I'll hand it over to you guys to get us started.
Thank you, Daisy, for the introduction. Yes, welcome everyone. As Daisy just said, we had this meat business talk planned for a while now. And before we jump in, we'll obviously give you a brief introduction about ourselves. I'm very fortunate here today to have my good friend and colleague Brendan from the North American team here to really share each other's opinion a bit on the meat markets, trends, but also the challenges that we see on both sides of the market. So myself, I'm looking after the Australian market, Australia, New Zealand, and I'm doing this now since 2016, roughly, for the sales side and a bit of the implementation as well, all over the meat. So from red meat, pork, beef, poultry. That's a bit my area here in Australia. Brendan, maybe if you want to quickly introduce yourself as well.
Sure. My name is Brandon Drung. Hello from yesterday. Technically over here. I'm based just outside of Toronto in Canada. My background is primarily meat processing. Started off as a butcher shop, as a kid. Worked my way through university and working in different meat plants. Ended up being a CSB user for a long time, and then moving into more of a process control and specializing more on the sales and how the system is utilized within the both the slaughter, cut, and processing side of things. So I started very early and have continued on in my career. I handle a lot of the North American market over here under my CEO, and then obviously Witor and Markus and I have known each other for a long time now, between through CSB and then the relative markets of North America and then Australasia.
Thank you, Brendan. But before we jump into the topic, I think a brief introduction about ourselves, obviously, but the business we're working for, CSB as well, just so you get a feeling why we think we can talk about these topics we're going to address. CSB is, if you know or may not know, we are a software provider specifically for the meat sector. So our system, from ERP to MES, automation integration, is really tailored for the meat industry and the meat sector. So we're doing this now since over 40 years. The group itself, we have over 1,200 installation and so many employees. Really, to a bit of a brief overview, I think that as well, Brendan, for America and Australia. So in Australia, we are located, our location is in Melbourne, but we have more and more people working remotely as well, consultant service, technical installation support. And we have vast installations all over the Australian country and New Zealand as well. So we all manage and support that from our Melbourne office as part of the CSB group. Maybe if you want to give a quick introduction about the North American team as well, just so that people know where we're at.
Yeah, so same kind of idea. We have been in North America now for coming up well over 25 years. And you can literally draw a line from our furthest East Coast installation in just outside of Nova Scotia, all the way down to Southern California. We are, go across the entire Canada and United States. The vast majority of what we do is meat-oriented processing. We obviously have a unique specialty in that with CSB, but everything from slaughter, cut, all the way to secondary processing, and then some customers that are amalgamations of both of those, doing their own cut, slaughter right into packaging itself. We have everything from companies that are small butcher shops that do their own slaughter to large steak cutting operations that are 16, 17 plants, all under the CSB umbrella. So we have a massive variety in what we see, and the same kind of idea we see with Australia and North America, very, very big areas that have very unique kind of regional specialties and specific areas where certain things are processed, and obviously a very vibrant meat industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So same applies here, and I think that's why we wanted to initiate this webinar here. We see a lot of similarities in obviously the challenges, but also the market itself, the customers we directly represent, as you said as well, from small butchers all the way up to multi-site group installations, and they all, small or big, they all have more or less the same challenges, right? And I think that's a good jump here right into the topic. So what we'll not do here today is, and just to set the expectations straight, we're not going through a lot of slides and a lot of presentations and demos such as this. We really want to have an open communication and open discussion about a couple of topics Brennan and myself found very main challenging for both of the industries and for both of these countries, and wanted to address them. So I think the first one we're going through here, we have on our list, is going straight to the heart of the business, right? Cutting and planning. So with cutting and planning, as I said, this is obviously the heart of the business. It has a lot of challenges, and Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong or jump in at any time. It obviously have a lot of challenges because different to further processing, we really have an animal, a product that comes in at a certain stage with a certain grade, that we have to process through our whole supply chain and have to meet the demand in sales. So we have really two sides of things. We have push and pull, trying to meet the both best outcome for the product, that livestock that comes in, if we're working with livestock or even with primals, and then the sales demand from our customers. Where, Brandon, do you see the biggest challenge, particularly in that part, when we talk about cutting and planning, and how do you think they overcome that?
Yeah, you can look at it from two perspectives. One from the non-technical side of, okay, how do we disassemble this and do this in a way that's going to be as efficient as possible while making all our customers happy? And then from the tech side, you're doing something that's very illogical to most tech-oriented platforms, right? You are taking something apart. So outside of the meat industry, recycling, and mining and lumber, very rarely are you actually, taking something apart as part of a manufacturing process. I mean, we always think of manufacturing as putting something together. So you have an inherent, completely illogical process. And at the same time, how do you plan around that? So obviously, you ask a computer to do something like this, it wants to build something up, or you have that entire idea in the cut slaughter side of the reverse bill of materials, which could tell you the pieces you want, but how does that connect to the whole? How do you have so many carcasses coming out of a cooler, and sure, you need so many sirloins, or you need so many strip loins, or you need so many hams, but how do you actually account for everything else that's there? One of the biggest challenges we constantly find is not even so much the primals. Generally, we can have a really good understanding of that, but what do you do with the byproducts? What is in making this? What am I going to be left with, and what do I do with it? And this has been the struggle for 30, 40, 50, even beyond that, of years of how to handle that problem. Something that's a little bit somewhat unique. I mean, when you have the opportunity to work for a company that was started by a butcher who understands the logic of this and made every effort to then hire the kids of the butcher shops he sold to initially with his solution to actually bring in people who had IT backgrounds, but at the same time also understood what meat was, you get a far more concise. It's one of the reasons that I would say CSB is a little bit unique in the fact of why we are so niched, because what we do is very unique, and not a lot of folks can take it on, because for many companies, they don't see the value in it. Oh, it's just this one little portion of the industry. But for those of us who are in it, these are major challenges that we need to overcome. Yeah. The demand side of things, I think, is always the biggest, right? I mean, we're salespeople. We know it. You get harped on to, sell more, do more. What are you going to do with it? What are your plans? And at the same time, operations and production are going, okay, well, we have too much of this. We need to make this. We won't have enough. How do you create that balance? And, I think even, I think that probably rates some of the highest. The last thing, and anybody who's a secondary processor knows this, you hate being shorted any kind of products. That one combo of something that doesn't show up is incredibly frustrating and can affect your process. So from the primary side, how do we handle it? How do we do it effectively and efficiently? And then from the secondary processing side, what else could I be using to make my products, which is great around being able to use bombs and recipes of being able to say, hey, I could use this kind of ham trim to make this specific product, or could I be using boneless sirloins off the loins to achieve the same thing? Being able to look at different variants, being able to look at when the cost of things are. Obviously, we know throughout the year, there's more demand for some things than there are for others. Do we start using alternatives? All that kind of wraps into that planning process. And like we know in meat, it's a juggling act. People who don't work in meat, I don't know what they do all day. Because anybody in the meat world is just putting out fires and understanding how to deal with specific processes and, to be able to achieve what they can. One of the things CSB can do is add a little bit of a technical light to that, to be able to streamline that process to, help processors really understand what they need to do, how they need to do it, and how to do it efficiently.
And get a deep insight really into that planning and forecasting for that. I think you're absolutely right. And again, it mirrors very much with the sentiment in this market here as well. The industry understands how the cutting process and the planning works. However, the supporting processes from an IT perspective, as you just said, are rarely there. Most of the time, we're talking about bombs or reverse bombs, which is not what cutting and dismantling is. And that's really where the challenge lies. So the mindset between what we're physically doing and what a system potentially can do. But as you said, if you have a specialized system like CSB that from the ground off has been developed by a butcher with the background in the mind, right? Can actually cater for that. And then really demanding or planning a forecast of the demand as well, because the other challenging part of that as well is not just only, at least in my experience, right? Not just only the secondary products, what can we make out of them, but order fulfillment for your customers to which you are the supplier, right? And if we have bigger customers, you just named them in your world and our world, they usually have a vendor ranking as well. So they demand from you 100% delivery rate, A and B products, right? So that needs to flow into your forecasting as well. You as producer and processor obviously want to always process the highest value, but sometimes you have to process the secondary value in order to stay A-listed on your customer side, right? So all of this is, as you said, it's a really tough balancing act. And that's why we really had this as the first point of our discussion here as well, right? That is something we see here. That is something you see in America as well, and how that can be tackled and overcome, really.
Yeah, and the biggest concern I think I see from a lot of our customers is they have a Jim or a Rick or a Bob or a Thomas or whoever it is who just builds up if they don't have technical solutions, do their planning. They've done it forever. They know what it is. They have specific tools they like to use. And, the example is always, well, if they didn't come to work that day or the worst case scenario happened, they weren't there anymore, what happens? Many of these processes have this tribal knowledge aspect of, well, yeah, that's Jim. That's what he does. He handles this. And so how do you
dependent processes, rather than role dependent. Absolutely,
So how do you codify that and take that person's knowledge and be able to actually put it into structures for what they do to be able to digitize it and do it repeatedly, and then make that person's job a lot easier? We've seen folks who have to take a day to plan the next day's cut based on what they have. Obviously, in the meat world, we always have that window of we're killing one day, we cut the next day. But being able to, more importantly, shrink that down to being able to do this incredibly quickly, and then being able to look at, okay, so what do we do with the rest? So all of a sudden focusing on more around how do we make sure we're not as my old boss used to say, selling day old bread, right? You don't want to have meat sitting on you don't want to have meat sitting there for a long period of time. But more importantly, to your point, we talk about different vendor classes, being able to go from the cut side of things, being able to go to your customer and say, hey, look, I'm not going to have what you need Monday, Tuesday, but Wednesday through Friday won't be an issue. Could you change your production, for instance, because I know what I'm going to be able to give you. Letting everybody have that down the chain, all of a sudden makes everybody else be able to plan and do their work considerably easier, as opposed to being shorted, having people on staff to do the work when the raw material isn't there, and just what the headache that can cause throughout the entire chain. And that all starts really, in the cut and kill cut portion of the raw material chain.
Yeah, no, that's definitely. And I think in a matter of time, especially the cutting, planning, forecasting the demand. So it is such a big topic. I mean, Brandon, you and I, we could probably go on this by itself for an hour.
We have. We have done that.
We easily can go along that. But with the challenges the markets have, as well as the potential solutions that's out there to overcome them, right? I think the majority of the time is really, in my perspective, it's a mindset, changing things from, as we said, right, a person-defined process, right, the Jim or the Bob, to a role-defined process. Because the next thing is also when we have Excel sheets, they are very personalized and emotional as well, right? Someone who creates an Excel sheet that controls the business, that's a very emotional investment as well, which you then have obviously to counter for as well.
And try taking away that tool from them, and they become they're very attached.
That will be a challenge in itself as well. But yeah, in the matter of time, as I said, I think you mentioned another thing before as well, the staff that's involved as well, right? So to the next point is then what we see, straight as a result out of that is the labor cost that's been involved with that, and not just the labor cost for admin. We're particularly talking about the labor cost on the floor as well, right? Meat processing is today still a high labor intense product. That's just what it is. We have a lot of automations and optimizations in the industry already, from supporting on the kill floor throughout the boning, packaging. So there's a lot of automation, but yet still it's so, compared to other industries out there, so high intense in labor effort. And with that, again, reflecting that on the North American market and here in Australia, the labor costs behind that are obviously quite high. If we look into other markets like East Europe or South America, that's obviously a bit of a different topic, right? But in these where the high labor intensity, also high costs, that is then where the next challenge really comes. And how can we overcome this? We can obviously put more and more people on the line in order to compensate for higher productivity or for more, sales orders coming in, increasing the kill line. But ultimately, that doesn't increase the yield and the profitability of the company, nor does its competitiveness, right? So the more people you put on, the more error rates you have. Not only does your cost includes, but also the error rates. Again, there's a couple of solutions out there to overcome that besides automations. But how do you see this in America? I would assume it's very similar to here.
Yeah, it was always the interesting issue we had with North America to Europe. Obviously, I would argue Europe sits probably 10 years ahead of us when it comes to automation, especially in the meat world, because they had very skilled technical people who could do, especially when it comes to butchering and that, because it really is a trade and one that is considered, highly respected. Versus in North America, where labor was cheap and it was easy to do it, and you could just throw people at a problem. But the cost is so low, it's not really hurting you on the back end of looking at your profits, right? So the issue is always, okay, well, how do we get how do North Americans end up getting towards more that European model of efficiency? But what's really happened is you've seen where Europe was obviously trying to, with a high cost of labor, be able to automate as much as possible. In North America, it's sort of gone the same path, but in a different route, which would be the scarcity of people who want to do those specific jobs. and what that's entailed. So I would say, especially in North America, I would say any digital automation solution that's come in towards going in at plants itself hasn't really led to an extreme reduction in people. Those people are staying on, but they can be used far more effectively in areas that now allow for far more profit. So these are your value added items. So for every person you have to have doing a simple task that could be done, as the simple things of even just someone staying there, taking labels out of a machine and putting on a box or putting on a package, automating that process and being able to use that person somewhere else where they add more value, whether it's putting a knife to something and being able to create a product for a specific food service provider where you are now gaining margin on that. Or even having more efficient logistics in doing that as well. I mean, there's really ways to reduce using technology, but everyone is kind of coming to the same point, which is how do we do more with less, and how do we do it far more effectively? Because we're not seeing we're not seeing a huge push into the meat industry from a labor perspective. It seems to be the kind of work that people aren't super thrilled about doing at times, and the ones who do enjoy doing it are very, very good, and you want to utilize them better than what you currently are, with sometimes with tasks that almost seem simplistic.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It's a bit of a contradicting point there, right? You might think there's enough on the market, but it's not a really rewarding job, especially if we talk about like on the floor, as you just said, right? So it's hard to actually. So there's a couple of aspects. It's a cost behind that. It's getting these people on the floor, getting them qualified accordingly. There's a whole, turn off of these employees as well. But then I think the key point, really, what you just mentioned as well, is the intention is not about to cutting it, but to more effectively using these resources, right?
Redirect those resources, exactly. And I would argue it's a really good example of going back to even to the cutting and planning point, where you can look at what's actually required, be able to utilize, over 2 shifts, being able to have a value added shift where you have a significant labor portion attached to that, but then being able to plan out your primals and combos, boxes, stuff that is kind of more standardized cuts where you don't have to then have a ton of that value added put in. Because you've effectively, as opposed to now trying to do all those jobs over 2 shifts. As an example, could you effectively use one with labor and one where you now can have that reduction and still get the output you're looking for and make your customers happy, but at the same time reduce a lot of your costs in having to double up some of these processes just because you don't have a great hierarchical understanding of what needs to be done where and when.
I think that leads us, again, really good. We haven't rehearsed that. That leads us very good into the next topic. With reporting, data warehouse, and data in itself. So I think you just had a really, really crucial point you mentioned, that the hierarchy and especially the disconnect between that, right? So how do we capture data? How is it used within a business? And how's it be then communicated between different departments, different hierarchies, right? Again, it all starts, we talked about this in cutting, planning, through the labor and so on. The more disconnected these data funnels are, the more extra work you have and the more dysfunction you work as a company, right? You will always build workarounds, right? If you do not have proper data capturing, data sharing, and that is something, if you see with Excel and so on, Excel itself is a power tool, right? Don't get me wrong. But if you start then working with this department overarching, then we have an Excel here from Bob and we have an Excel here from Jim in finance. And then the communication is not clear. And then again, you start building workarounds around that. You're not as efficient and streamlined as you might think or as you could be as a business. You have more resources rather than more to combine this data and make sense out of them, rather than again using these resources and people to actually action on the data, right? So it's more about data maintenance rather than especially if we talk about planner, it's about putting all these data together and trying to make sense out of it rather than using the data. Let the system do predictions based on what we said, forecast, push and pull, and then make informed decision on the go, right? So it's a complete complete
opposite.
section.
Yeah. Over here we had because we didn't have the same level of skilled labor, especially around the cutting portion of things. Really, reporting was the only way to understand how well you did that day. Usually, from a yielding perspective, did we do well or did we not do well? And unfortunately, it's always a situation of looking in the review mirror. Okay, how can we better tomorrow, as opposed to are we gaining some level of close to real-time understanding of what we're doing? Have we produced enough? Have we produced too much? And when you have those data capture points, it makes that incredibly easy. I mean, we've seen the meat industry run for years of everything that happens before you put a label on the box is almost in essence a black box, where you have some skilled managers who understand, what's going on there, can kind of put the weights together and figure it out, but they're all doing it on the finished goods or WIP items, mostly the finished goods items, and then kind of trying to work their way back instead of having those data capture points through the process, so that you can see and report, where have I gained, where have I lost? Why do I have this weight coming in? Why am I losing here, here, and here? Why is I'm I'm a quarter of the way through my shift and my yields are completely off. Once again, you used to only be able to do that at the end of the shift, looking back, or even a day later. And we're finally at the point now where, we have the level of automation and data collection to be able to kind of look at a line why it's running, to be able to understand the weight coming in and the weight in the finished goods of all the different finished goods and WIP items coming out, to say, hey, are we achieving what we're supposed to be achieving? We brought in, as an example, so many beef carcasses, and then being able to say, well, we know the weight coming in, we know the size of those particular carcasses, we know what the expected yield out of that should be. Are we in the threshold where we're good, or all of a sudden are we way off? And we all know, I mean, it's not the trims and the offcuts that garner you the money, as it is, a lot of the time those primals especially, and having not understanding what's going on, is critical. But even from a profitability standpoint, being able to look at, being able to compare your, costs on the floor to your finished good cost, to your sell cost, and understand all those intermediate factors that are there, so that you can actually have a firm grasp of, hey, am I making the margins I want to be making on this? Am I making why am I making a better profit here? Why am I losing here? Even just simple things that CSB does, like cost bear calculation, right? Being able to understand the fact that, hey, the entire carcass makes up, obviously, your raw material that you're going to be taking and breaking down. But at the same time, you look at pork, the belly's always worth a ton for all the guys who are making bacon, right? And how does that offset your costs of all the, feet and hocks and trims that you're selling to make sure that you're consistently profitable through the entire process, by being able that ability to bear. And that's all obviously market driven, but things that actually can be reported on and captured.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. And I think every business out there, small or large, they want to have exactly those KPIs. Right? What is my yield, obviously, but what's my cost margin, what's my profit at the end? Bottom line is in my P&L, how much profit did we make as a business? But then I want to drill down as well and see, okay, my individual products, as you said, where are we finished goods versus WIP, right? Where do we actually make the margins, or where do we make losses? Everyone wants to see that. Why do you think, in your opinion and what you see, have so many companies still the struggle to actually get to this point? We have the technology, right? We have the data capturing technology. We have the data capturing hardware, as you said. This can be manual. This can be semi-automatic, fully automatic. Why, even though everyone wants that, do we still have so many meat processors out there who do not have this visibility? Although that's one of the main thing they want, besides obviously reducing the cost, but have the visibility of that.
Change is hard.
Change is hard, right?
How many times do you go into to meet a prospective customer or even a current customer? Well, we've just always done it this way. So you're constantly having, and this is where it comes to having and dealing with a company like ours that has a lot of knowledge in this area, where we can, we really are industry experts, to kind of sometimes have a bit of those tough talks that a lot of our customers and prospective customers need to hear, but sometimes have to have an outside source tell them, which is, you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve if you're not willing to make the changes to do so. It's not like you can add simply one extra data collection point and all of a sudden every problem you have is solved. You are changing processes, you're changing the way you view things, you're changing how they work. I think it actually goes into this next point of challenges of stagnation. It's just always been done that way. And look, Markus, we have customers we've had for years that deal with this we have our solution. It does what we need to do. We like to get this, and this out of it. Okay. Well, to affect that change, you are going to have to make process augmentations over here to achieve that. It's kind of just always the way we've done it. And yes, in a company like CSB, it's a little bit easier because we deal with the same kind of business all the time to be able to take a prospective customer, a current customer, to another customer that's doing that process so they can see it. But I think the meat industry is incredibly creative in getting what it needs to get out of very, very simple processes, enough to almost trick itself that it doesn't always need to try and be better. And all of a sudden you see it somewhere else and you go, well, if they can do it, why can't I? But that initial fear of change, this guy on the line is going to hate doing that and it's just not going to happen. Or well, we've always done it this way, so we have to continue doing it. But, maybe there's something we can do. And a lot of that, to be fair, it comes from the top down. Like, either you try to make a change from the floor up without, everybody being bought in, you're going to run into a lot of issues, right? A lot of the time this has to be mandated and edict. It has to be, sometimes come from on high that they're going to do this, but at the same time, bringing in the folks all the way down from the office to the floor to say, we are going to implement this process. We are going to make that change, and everybody has to be on board to do so. Because if you don't, you always very easily can fall into the way you've done it before. Right. I mean, that's like with anything. You play a particular sport and you've kind of always played it that way, and you want to improve. Well, it does make an effort to make improvement. Now, you reap the rewards at the end, obviously, but at the same time, making those changes is not easy.
No,
No, it's really finding your ROI for that, right? Of, what is your return on investment? If I'm willing to make this change, what do I get out of it? And is there a business case for it? And is this something I need to do? And you know what it's like. We do these wonderful events like IFA and that, where we bring customers from all over the world. I'm pretty sure you just got back, and I don't know what time zone you think you're in, but I doubt it's the one you actually are in. Going back from Europe like that. But we take customers to other areas or other places around the world, or show them reference videos, and they go like, why aren't we doing this? So you can do this with the system we have. Yes. Why? Well, because you've been hesitant to change. You've kind of gotten to a bit of stagnation. You've got enough information that you're able to know that you're somewhat profitable, for instance. But now, where does that next level of improvement? We're always improving in the software in our solutions, and making modules better, being able to improve on that based on the feedback we get from our customers. It's really a good opportunity for even current customers to take advantage of that and be able to change their own processes.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. The thing is, I see in the industry is that there is a certain knowledge sharing, right? So industries from Australia, they go over to America or to Europe, as you said, right? Either through vendors like ourselves or by themselves, and have a look how other companies do that. However, the thing I always experience to a certain extent is that you're absolutely right. There's a certain stagnation or hesitance to go the next step for various reasons, right? Obviously, the fear of a big change. How does that impact our business? But when I see these changes, they're usually very departmentalized, right? So it's someone from maintenance looking for something, and someone from
siloed issues. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're looking from bottom to top, versus what you just said is absolutely right. It needs to come from top to bottom to really understand and push that. But at the same time, take the people like on the floor with as well. So I think you're absolutely right. It needs to come from top to bottom as a business decision, and to go that step together. And it might be a bit scary, it might be a bit worrying, right? But you do this usually with a trusted partner together. But then you need to take these users on board as well, right? Because otherwise you have a certain threshold and pushback, even though if you say, you know, that's the way we're going, if they don't feel quite comfortable with that, you need to get them along. You need to obviously, you know, draw the line and say, this is the outlook. But at the end, you also need to, you know, make them heard, right? So they need to be heard because their input is very important. As we discussed before, there's a lot of things that's been done individually over time, and we've always done that. If you just plainly brush over these personal, you know, individual design solutions, that will, you know, create friction, right? So rather than just brushing over that, obviously set the direction, but also take these people mid on board, take their value, take their experience. They have usually 10, 15, 20 years in the industry or even within the same business. Take that knowledge with, how can we implement that into that new system, whatever it is. But you're absolutely right. So we see this stagnation, not just on your industry, a couple of customers obviously as well. It is potentially also something to do with once you've done a big ERP implementation, that is always a big job. It's not just a new packaging line. It's not just a new mincer, right? It impacts the whole business. So that sometimes can be a bit of a threshold as well to overcome that, right? Okay, we've done the big job now. That was a bit of a, you know, work for everyone. But now where do we go further? And I think you're absolutely right. It's always good to see to other customers, installations, what potentially is out there. Because I think the biggest challenge, I personally think the biggest challenge with that, and that's what we talked about, is the stagnation or the risk of stagnation, is you put a great system, process, automation in place, and then you don't develop further, right? As you said before, okay, we have a certain profit margin, we have a certain competitiveness now, but we're not developing further. We're stagnating now, and the competition is overtaking us, right? And that's really just a fear of change, or even sometimes, you know, analysis paralysis as well, right? We're analyzing. Do we need? And we're stagnating as well, right? And that just puts a business with the greatest system in place sometimes really at risk to grow, right? Or even stay competitive to the other companies out there.
Yeah, and this is always something I think that CSB has done incredibly well when it comes to things like, you know, really putting together detailed concepts for specific solutions, because you have to have a game plan, and more importantly, it's never easy. And I'm sure you heard it a million times, but, you know, in the software world especially, it is you know, in the salespeople like us who maybe have less scruples are always pushing the idea of, oh, don't worry, it's simple, it's an easy thing to do. And then you get halfway through an implementation, you know, the budget's a disaster. You know, one of your implementers left, and you have this, you know, half, you know, you are, as the term is, you know, you're half pregnant in this situation of what do we do? You know, do we walk away? Do we stay? I mean, we've seen this for years. What is it? Something like 75+% of all ERP implementations in particular are abandoned. A lot of the time it's because you know, the folks at the customer level didn't see the outcome they wanted, and, you know, it was being too much. On the other side, from our world, have you created realistic expectations of what this is going to look like? It's a painful process. It just is, no matter whether it's us or any other vendor in that regard. But if you have an understanding ahead of time of what those challenges are and what you are going to achieve at the end because of it, you know, at least gives you that guiding light to look forward to and have that game plan to achieve it. Because if you're wishy-washy at all in any of your goals and the process itself, you know, you run into the risk of not being able to achieve it, right?
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. A new ERP, MES, whatever, it's always a challenge. But I think that comes then with a bit of the benefit of someone like us, right? A bit of product placement here. But as someone like us who's done that for 40 years, so we have white papers, right? What should you do before you start an ERP, right? What are how do you need to put your horses in place, you know, so that you have it as smooth as can? You're right. There's always something, someone might leave midway through the implementation or whatever. But you know, all of these things, we've done this now for over 40 years. well over 1,200 installations. That's what we have today, right? So well over 1,200 installations in various industries. Me, obviously, primarily, if you have a partner like that who can, again, hold you by the hand and not just work with multiple partners in order to achieve one solution. You have one partner who can hold you from the beginning, from sales. As you said, Brendan, I personally think we're pretty good when it comes to sales concepts as well, in which we describe the solution and the benefits, and it comes out of the for the customer, right? So they can immediately find themselves in that, what it will look like, to the implementation, to the training of the end users and the key users, right? So all the way along the process. And you don't have to hand this over, right? Again, I've seen this sometimes on the industry as well, where you get a certain software, but it's been implemented by a third-party partner, and the support is done yet again by someone else. And maybe even very hardcore is as well if you then have different partners throughout the implementation, through the milestones, right? But again, if you have someone who, as we say, a one-stop partner, you just go all the way through, and we'll hold the hands for that project. And as I said, preparation as well. How do you put your horses in place to prepare for it, right? Contingency plans and so on as well. And as we said before, you need to go top to bottom. You can't just only include the board or the decision maker. You need to keep the stakeholders of each of these areas in these discussions and throughout the implementation as well, right?
Yeah, you're completely correct. It really is a partnership, and that matters. I mean, you're on equal footing to understand how to get the solution. We want you to achieve what you want to achieve, and we're trying to give our our best at every single time to do that. But yeah, it's one of the unique things about CSB2, I think, especially in this world of when we program the solution, we make the solution, we we install it with you, and then we support it afterwards. I mean, it's not, we don't have, a partner for the implementation, then a partner will handle service. I mean, there's a lot of large software firms that do this, and you really, outside of maybe something new you buy, you don't almost have any real contact with the actual creator of your platform, which is becoming more and more, as software companies try and cut costs in a lot of areas. It becomes more and more, you're seeing that more and more often, much to the detriment, I think, of the solution itself, because you just don't have the ability to, you don't feel like you're actually dealing, with the creators of the software there. So how do you take in customer feedback? How do you understand what the industry needs?
Your own business model of these particular vendors mimics exactly the problem they're trying to solve for their customer, right? We have different departments, completely isolated, and that is it might be cost reduction here or there, as you just said, right? We're trying to reduce the cost, someone else outsourced the service, but they're basically inevitably mimic exactly the problem they're trying to solve with the solution. But the solution is just one. That's zeros and ones, right? There's support that comes after it. And that goes all the way through. As I said, from sales, what has been discussed, the expectation management, what does the customer, what do you expect out of this project besides the software, right? The software is there, but what do you expect as an outcome, right? The training of the users, usability, the ease of it, and streamlining your supply chain. That can only be achieved if you have this fully integration from sales through the implementation and delivery of the product to the support, right?
Yeah, I had a customer refer to it recently as, CSB being the brain of their system. I mean, they have a couple other solutions that are plugged into CSB, but the source of truth in the reporting and everything about it is CSB itself, because you have to go to one source of truth. You have to have your system of record, and when you can have one source of truth, it's easy to pull from that for the reporting aspects and everything you're doing. Because if you don't have that, you're constantly cobbling together interfaces and systems to get the information that you need, instead of having a single source of truth to go to.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think that really goes hand, right? And if you have a partner like that will make as heavy as ERP implementations are, it will make it much more easier, right? At least that's what we say. And that's one of the points why we wanted to address this as well. Is obviously it's all a bit of a chain in there, right? You have the challenge of the stagnation, which is then obviously a fear of how we implement that. But if you have someone who's a one-stop provider for that, that's just the ideal scenario for that, right? Also afterwards support, as we said, right? So if you have something to reach out, you have the right contact person. You don't have to go to the third-party supplier or whatever it is, who then reaches out and might or might not get a feedback on eventual changes. So that's really a huge game changer. I personally think so. The last point, we didn't have quite a nice bridge to that yet, but the last point we wanted to address is obviously AI in the meat industry is one. Why we want to do this, I think it's quite obvious, Brendan, right? AI is in talks everywhere at the moment, right? With the breakthrough here a couple of years ago with ChatGPT, and still the development around that became much more mainstream. And AI, we wanted to talk about this not so much because it is a challenge in itself, like the other things we talked about, they are existing challenges. The cutting, labor cost, obviously reporting, having one source of data, as you said, the challenging of stagnation. But we see that, and that's why we wanted to bring this point here to discussion, that AI in the meat industry is obviously being looked at and used to certain areas, however, not in the right points, right? So when it comes to AI, we've seen it's been, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but we see AI being used mainly about data reporting, right? It comes to, okay, I have these different data here, make sense out of it, and give me the right KPIs, right? Rather, while CSB takes the approach to actually uses AI in processes, right? So we have, you just mentioned IFA before, we had one of our products showcasing there the CSB identifier. So what we do there is we use AI and machine learning to put it at the end of your cutting exit, and rather than having, again, a person, so that's a nice bridge to what we said before, to labor cost, rather than having a person there standing 8 hours per shift or whatever, and purely identifying the product, what's coming out and printing the label, that machine is doing it for you, right? So it's learning based on machine learning and AI, that product coming out, and then you have processes behind it, which is capturing the weight, printing the label automatically. But that is the kind of AI we see would be very beneficial, and is very beneficial. We have that in a couple of installations. Again, you can see this on our YouTube channel as well, live and running as well, and very beneficial, right? Because you streamline the process, you go back to the proper data capturing with that, you have reduced labor costs, which you then can use in other stations or other more value add positions, and you have automated and streamlined your business, right? So with that alone, we see a big benefit. Well, what we see on the other side is that AI being used more like as a bandage, right? We have different data silos, make sense out of it. How do you see that, Brandon?
So I spent about 5 years of my career doing AI applications in the meat industry, specializing in a lot of hyperspectral and image pattern recognition, and doing those specifically for the meat world. AI isn't terribly well understood by, I would say, the vast majority of the population. They see the results and they are incredible. AI is incredibly good at parsing through and making certain insights to allow you to understand certain aspects of your business. Very much so. The stuff we're seeing with large language models, being able to do AI assistance and this sort of thing, being able to help automate sales entry and things like that. And then you have the pattern recognition side, like the imaging side, like we see with the CSB identifier, or what I did with my in my previous one of my previous companies. But it really has become a bit of a buzzword, just way the Internet of Things, IoT, Industry 4.0 was a couple of years ago. Certain big shifts like this, and it is a massive shift in the industry. Everyone kind of focuses on it and says, well, are we prepared for this? Do we have this? Do we have a solution around this? What do we need to know? Part of the way we set up our data warehouse is specifically designed for things like AI tools, especially around being able to parse through data, because you're creating an entirely separate warehouse of information that can be tapped into without affecting your production system. Having a safe way to do that, that's not actually going to cause any issues with your process. But in the other side of it, it's understanding that you have to, AI models work because they have a data stream that is good. The line always you see the line you always see in machine learning programmers especially is garbage in, garbage out. If you feed an AI model garbage, it's going to give you out garbage. It needs to have a clear goal and what it's trying to achieve. And a lot of that comes from, how to use AI to optimize, potentially use your processes within a plant. Well, you have to have really good data collection points. The more information you can feed those kind of models, the more you can actually gain from it. If you're trying to use it as a band-aid to get around the fact that you're not doing any of these processes, it becomes a lot less accurate and becomes a lot less effective. You have to really be able to provide these AI tools with the data they need to be able to help you. And if you don't have good data coming in, you're not going to get good results coming out, and it's going to affect your business decisions. It's so interesting to see. We've systematized these kind of things for years within CSB of being able to handle production planning or the outputs and reports and all that sort of all those sort of key important areas. But at the same time, an AI model comes along and it tells you to do something, and people just jump like, oh, there's no way they could that could be incorrect, without understanding the fact that it could be if it's not receiving. If it's not, the model isn't built with the proper amount of data that's there, which is something that I think, CSB can really helps with, because you are getting that high quality of data throughout your process, whether it's your sales process, your procurement process, whether it's your production process, and then being able to find those insights through some of those AI tools, whether it is in the pattern recognition side. I mean, it's really great to see what we do with the end of the cut exit, being able to identify and be able to label. But at the same time, how does that funnel downstream? How can you eventually get to being able to have pieces of meat come down the line and be able to control where they're going to go? You can do that through certain automation tools, but also can you eventually have an AI tool that's being able to identify that and send it where it needs to go, be able to grade that product on the fly to understand this is going to be better over here, this is going to be over here. Well, the only way, for as an example, the AI tool is going to understand that is you have to train it to understand what's good. And how do you know what's good? Well, because you have the data already from your previous process, because it's so rich, and you're able to actually train those models. Like there's a big disconnect in how these tools actually get built and used. And I mean, in some respects, it's unbelievably powerful. At the same time, you click the bottom of your screen when you're on a specific website, and a specific person or AI assistant is going to help you, and you can't get the answer you want because it hasn't dealt with that situation before. So it's really being able to parse that out of the better information you can give a lot of these AI tools, the better it's going to be for your business. And if you think that you can kind of skip over some of the hard parts of being able to give that information, you're going to find that the results you get are going to be mediocre.
Yeah, or you're going to make then the wrong decisions based on that information that AI will put out to you. And I think, you're absolutely right. And it comes down to the quality and the quantity of the data, right? Again, how much data capturing points do we have? How clear are they? And then do we have them in one silo, right? Or do we have them again in different silos, which have potentially different, units, different language codes, which then all need to be put in together as well. So it's again, one source of truth will help that AI as well, or whatever it is, the machine learning or large language models. I think that the key point is really, as you said, we're currently jumping on it. It's not to be underestimated, right? AI is a huge thing.
Oh, it's going to be, it's phenomenal. It really just comes down to, if you're not feeding those models that you're trying to work with the information you need, sure, you might be able to pull out certain sales-oriented trends because it's all based around after the process. But to really improve your process, it's a lot easier to have a tool tell you, what something is, hey, you're selling a lot of this. But it's also understanding all your costing models throughout the process to understand, well, actually, we're making the biggest margins here. We're making the biggest margins this time of the year. And, being able to do some predictive planning side of things for seasonality, as an example, which I know a couple of my customers are using AI tools for. But the reason they can get that, the richness of that information to be able to help them with that, even year out planning of what they expect to need to do, is the fact that the information's there and it's rich and it's incredibly useful, and you can then help make those decisions.
Yeah, because you're absolutely right. Making these AI tools on sales reports, what many people sometimes misunderstood is that sales is history, right? Sales is, that's done. You've marketed, you budgeted, you executed, you had your losses on that. You dropped the meat and you had quarantines. It's sales is history. But as you said, how can we do it actually better? How can we forecast that, right? That's and plan with what's coming from livestock, right? Which is living goods, right? Which is animals coming in, all the way from from the farms potentially to the end consumer, right? Sales in itself, that's history. Everything's been done, right? We've sold it. But how can we do this for the future better, right? So 100%.
Yeah, and no matter what we do, I mean, we're trying to get there with some of the cool AI-oriented automation stuff that's coming out around potential cutting applications and things like that, being able to actually automate some of those processes. We're still a very labor-intensive industry, and AI is great to help you be able to shift that, but at the same time, understanding what you're producing and how you're producing it is only going to lead to better gains overall, and then being able to supply that information because you have that data into a tool to be able to help you make decisions. It's going to only make that tool more effective.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. We're coming towards the end of this webinar. I think we'll pretty much hit a point landing there. Just a couple of links here were summarized, but I think as a final statement, Brandon, really going forward to what we had this another motto: challenges, tactics for the meat industry. Really, one of them is overcome that fear of stagnation, I think, right? Because that will drive all the other things. Fear of stagnation, we're not changing our cutting and planning. Fear of stagnation, we're not going to, implement. Fear of stagnation, we're staying stuck where we are because, as you said, that's how we've always done it, right? And trying to have quick fixes with AI, might solve certain problems. The same with everything else where you have island solutions in place. But really, the next way is to overcome this fear of stagnation, to look into that. And how can you improve your business to streamline it and to make it really competitive stay competitive on the market, right? Because the competition doesn't sleep, right? We had, as I said, on the IFA, we had a couple of customers coming by, the one who's using the CSB identifier as well, and they're so proud of having the solution because they know they made the next step, right? They are going forward, they streamlining, they have the proper data capturing and visibility of their business going on right now, right? So even while they were in IFA, I think they were from, don't nail me to that, I think from Spain.
No, you're right.
They could go online and get the data right now, what's happening, right? And I think as a takeaway for that is really taking these challenges we currently or addressed here today, and to think about how are we actually managing them in our business, right? Do we have a lot of person-dependent processes? Are our departments isolated from each other, or do we look at it as a holistic view, right? What are your last thoughts here?
I think in these discussions that we've had, you can see having a partner that can take you through this is
100%.
probably one of the most important portions, right? Because you are you're feeding off things that have been done before. You have both history and competence in specific areas, and a partner that understands your business. I mean, we've all seen it. Folks try and come into our industry and think they have a particular solution, and it's just not terribly effective because they really don't understand what happens on the floor. And I think that mitigates, because it's all comes down to the same thing, and it's risk. And when you have a partner who can show you these solutions, how they work all over the world, you mitigate all those considerable risks that could exist by doing it properly and having that partner that's going to guide you through it to get you where you need to go based on those goals.
Yeah. Very well put. I think you're absolutely right. finally, I think if you do have any questions, we didn't have time here now. We really reached out all the 1 hour here. But if you do have any questions at the end, feel free to reach out to myself, to Brendan, to Daisy. More than happy to have these discussions with you. As we said before, we're doing this for 40 years. We're happy to consult you there, showing you best practice, what we see that works obviously on both sides of the world in multiple installations for the meat industry. Brennan, do you have any last words to our audience?
It's been an absolute pleasure to be here. It's considerably past my bedtime, and I'm very happy that I was able to do that. Drank a lot of coffee to be here, and it was worth every second. So, as usual, Daisy and Markus, thank you so much.
It's very valuable having you.